The air was thick with tension. 100 pairs of eyes stared in my direction, some curious, some skeptical, but all waiting. I sat at the witness stand, my fingers lightly gripping the edge of the polished wood, feeling the weight of the moment. The judge's gavel had just called the courtroom to order. The whispers that had buzzed like bees around the room died down. The world was watching. Cameras, journalists, even those who had never met me before, every single one of them seemed to believe they already knew the truth. I took a slow breath, feeling the stillness of the room settle over me like a heavy blanket. This moment had been a long time coming, and yet, even now as I sat under the harsh, clinical lighting of the courtroom, it felt surreal. The walls, lined with mahogany paneling, seemed to close in around me, the cold reality of my situation, pressing against my chest like an iron weight. Somewhere in the gallery I could hear the quiet rustle of papers, the creak of leather chairs as reporters shifted in their seats, eager for the next revelation, the next headline. Across from me, my ex-wife sat at her table, her lawyers flanking her like guards at the gate. Amber's expression was carefully composed, her lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes fixed straight ahead. I wondered if she felt the same knot of anxiety curling in my stomach, or if she was as poised as she appeared. Once, not so long ago, I had looked into those same eyes and seen love. Now they were cold, distant, unreadable. My attorney, a woman I had come to trust with my life, stood beside me. She gave me a brief nod, a silent reassurance that I wasn't alone. But no amount of preparation could truly steel me for what I was about to say, for the weight of the words I was about to speak. "Mr. Depp," she began, her voice steady, controlled, yet filled with a quiet determination. "Can you tell the court? Did you ever strike Miss Heard?" My throat felt dry. I knew the answer. I had known it every second of every day since the accusations first surfaced, since my world had begun to unravel piece by piece. And yet, I understood the gravity of what I was about to say. I glanced at the jury, their faces a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. They were the ones who mattered. Not the reporters, not the spectators, not even the people watching from their television screens at home. These were the men and women who would decide my fate. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on me. And then I spoke. "No. I have never hit Miss Heard. I have never struck any woman in my life." The words left my mouth with a certainty that came from deep within me, from a place of truth that no lie could shake. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the jury absorbed my statement, their pens hovering over their notepads, their eyes flickering between me and Amber. In the gallery, a few murmurs rippled through the spectators before the judge gave a sharp glance in their direction, silencing them instantly. Amber's lawyer shifted slightly in her chair, her expression giving nothing away, but I knew what was coming. The cross-examinations, the attempts to twist my words, to paint me as something I was not. I'd spent years living under the shadow of these accusations, years watching my name be dragged through the mud, my career, my reputation, my life, dismantled piece by piece. And now I was here, facing the very people who would determine if I could ever reclaim what had been taken from me. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on my shoulders. I was not just speaking for myself. I was speaking for the man I had been, for the years I had spent silent, for the people who had believed in me, who had stood by me when the world had turned against me. I had told the truth. Now, all I could do was wait and see if the world was ready to listen. Accusations. That was all they were, and yet they carried the power to strip away everything I had ever built. It was astonishing how quickly a story could be shaped, how easily a person could be recast as a villain with nothing more than words. It didn't matter that I knew the truth, that those closest to me knew the truth. The world had already decided. Sat in the courtroom, my hands clasped together, listening as the allegations were read aloud once again. Each word was a dagger, each claim another stone added to the weight I had been carrying for years. The prosecution laid out their argument with practiced precision, painting a picture of a man I did not recognize, a man they wanted the world to believe I was. Amber's lawyer stood, her voice even, deliberate. "The evidence presented shows a pattern of abuse, Mr. Depp. A pattern of control, of violence. The bruises, the witness testimonies, the messages, they all tell a story. Are you saying that every single one of these claims is false?" I lifted my eyes to meet hers. The calm, measured expression on her face was that of someone who had already made up their mind. I could see it in the way she looked at me, in the way she emphasized every damning word, as if daring me to contradict her. "Yes," I said, my voice unwavering, "every single one." There was a murmur from the bare spectators, a quiet ripple of disbelief, of intrigue, of judgment. The judge silenced them with a single look, but I could still feel their reactions in the air. People wanted a scandal, they wanted a villain, and they wanted a hero. I just wasn't sure which role they had assigned to me yet. Amber sat across the room, her posture rigid, her gaze forward. I wondered what she was thinking. I wondered if she felt any guilt for what she had done, for the story she had crafted so meticulously, for the years of pain she had inflicted upon me, not just in private, but in the public eye. Did she regret it? Or had she convinced herself that her version of the truth was real? I knew what had happened between us. I knew how the fights had started, how they had escalated, how they had become something neither of us could control. But I also knew that I had never raised my hand to her, not once. No matter how heated the arguments had become, no matter how much she had screamed, no matter how much she had thrown at me, literally and figuratively, I had never retaliated. Had walked away. Every single time I'd walked away, but that didn't seem to matter now. What mattered was the narrative that had been woven, the version of events that had been fed to the public. I'd spent decades building my career, my reputation, my legacy. And in a matter of moments, all of it had been reduced to nothing more than a headline. The jury shifted in their seats, taking notes, listening, watching. I could feel their scrutiny, their silent assessment of every movement, every inflection of my voice. Did they see the truth, or did they only see the image that had been painted of me over the years? My attorney stood beside me, calm and composed. "Mr. Depp, you have stated under oath that you have never hit Ms. Heard. Can you tell us why you believe these allegations were made against you?" I exhaled slowly. I had asked myself that question 1,000 times. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was something darker, something I would never truly understand. "All I can say," I answered, "is that I have spent my entire life trying to bring joy to people through my work. I have never been a violent person, and I will not sit here and allow lies to define who I am." Silence settled over the courtroom again. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in years, I had spoken my truth. Now I could only hope that someone was listening. There was a time when love had been the center of it all, when the world was quiet and simple, and the only thing that mattered was the way she looked at me, the way she laughed, the way we fit together in a way that felt effortless. I remembered the first time I saw her, how she seemed to light up the room with a presence that was impossible to ignore. She was captivating, the kind of person who could draw people in without even trying, and I was no exception. Our love had been intoxicating, filled with late-night conversations and whispered promises. It had been the kind of love that made you believe in fairy tales, the kind that made you think nothing could ever break it. We traveled the world together, held hands in places neither of us had ever been before, built a life that felt like something out of a dream. But dreams don't last forever, and love is not always what it seems. The fights started small, so small that they hardly seemed like fights at all. A disagreement over something trivial, a misunderstanding that left a sting but faded quickly. But then the misunderstandings grew. The stings didn't fade. I found myself constantly trying to fix something, to soothe something, to prevent. Something that I couldn't quite name. She would get upset over the smallest things, and I would find myself apologizing even when I wasn't sure what I had done wrong. At first I thought it was just the strain of our lives, the pressures of fame, the exhaustion of always being in the public eye. But then it became something else. She would accuse me of things I hadn't done, twist my words into something ugly, If I tried to defend myself, she would lash out, yelling, crying, slamming doors. I would try to walk away to put space between us, to let the fire burn out before it became something unmanageable. But that only made her angrier. She wanted me to stay, to fight, to feed the chaos that she seemed to thrive on. And when I refused, when I turned my back and refused to let the storm pull me in, that's when she truly lost control. I remembered the first time she hit me. The shock of it, the disbelief. It wasn't a slap, not at first. It was a shove, forceful enough to send me stumbling back. I had turned to her, my eyes wide, searching for something, remorse, regret, anything to tell me that she hadn't meant it. But there was nothing. Just rage, just the overwhelming need to hurt me in whatever way she could. The violence escalated from there. Sometimes it was screaming, relentless and cruel, words meant to cut deeper than any wound ever could. Other times it was physical, objects thrown across the room, fists pounding against my chest, a glass bottle shattered against the wall beside me. I never fought back. I never raised a hand to her, never met her anger with anything but silence. I told myself that it would get better, that she was just struggling, that she needed help, that if I could just be patient, if I could just love her enough, she would change. But love is not always enough, and no matter how much I tried, I could not save someone who did not want to be saved. Now, sitting in the courtroom, I watched her from across the room. She looked composed, collected, every bit the victim she had painted herself to be. But I knew the truth. I knew what had happened behind closed doors, the things that no one else had seen, the things that she would never admit. I wondered if she remembered those nights the way I did, if she ever thought about the way she had screamed at me, the way she had lashed out, the way she had pushed and pushed until I had nothing left to give. Did she remember the pain she had caused, or had she convinced herself that she was the only one who had suffered? The worst part was there had been a time when I would have given anything to protect her, to keep her from any kind of harm. But now she was the one causing it, and I was the one who had to prove that I was not the villain in the story she had created. The courtroom had become a second home to me, though it was a home I never wanted. The walls, the faces, the relentless scrutiny, they all blurred together into a suffocating reality I couldn't escape. Each morning I walked into this place knowing that my name would be dissected, my character questioned, my past rewritten by people who had never lived a second of it. And yet, I sat there, day after day, because I had to, because this was the only way to set things right. Amber's lawyers spoke with conviction, their voices steady, their words carefully chosen to build their version of events. They called upon witnesses, experts, anyone who could reinforce the image they had constructed of me. A violent man, an abuser, a monster. I listened as people I had once trusted took the stand, their statements carefully crafted, their testimonies designed to serve a narrative rather than the truth. It was a strange thing, watching your own life be rewritten in real time. I had never thought of myself as naive, but perhaps I had been. I had believed in people, in love, in the idea that the truth would always rise above lies. But now, sitting here, listening to the distortions of my own life, I realized just how easily a lie could overshadow the truth. It wasn't about what had happened. It was about what people could be made to believe. Amber sat across the room, composed, calm. Every now and then, she would glance in my direction, her expression unreadable. Did she feel anything? Did she feel guilt? Or was this just another performance, another role she had slipped into effortlessly? I used to know her better than anyone. Now, I wasn't sure if I had ever known her at all. My lawyer stood up, her voice cutting through the still air. Mr. Depp, can you describe the night in question? The night you are accused of harming Ms. Heard? I took a breath. I had been over this memory so many times, but now, with the entire world watching, I had to relive it once more. We had been arguing, I began, my voice steady but firm. It started like most of our arguments did. over something small, something meaningless. But it escalated. It always escalated. I could still see it in my mind, the way her face had twisted with anger, the way she had thrown her words at me like weapons. I had tried to walk away. That was always my instinct. I knew what would happen if I stayed. She didn't want me to leave, I continued, keeping my eyes on the jury. She never did. She blocked the door, screamed at me, accused me of things. That weren't true. And then she hit me. There was a pause, a collective breath being held in the room. She slapped me across the face, I said, my voice unwavering. I didn't react. I didn't hit her back. I never have. Amber's lawyer shifted in her seat, preparing to object, but my lawyer continued. What did you do? I walked away, I said simply. Like I always did. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder for a moment before the judge silenced them. I could feel the weight of every stare, every judgment, every assumption being rewritten in real time. I knew there were people who would never believe me, no matter what I said, no matter how much proof I had. But I also knew that for the first time I was being heard. Amber's lawyer finally spoke. So, you expect the jury to believe that you, a grown man, a Hollywood star, simply walked away? I met her gaze, unflinching. Yes, because that's exactly what happened. She wanted to shake me, to provoke me, to make me lose my temper, but she wouldn't, because I knew the truth, and for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid to speak it. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Every word I spoke seemed to linger in the air, settling over the room like dust in sunlight. I could feel the weight of every stare, some filled with doubt, others with curiosity. But the ones that mattered most were the eyes of the jury. They were the ones who would decide my fate, who would determine whether I would walk away from this with my name intact or if I would forever be branded as something I was not. Amber's lawyer cleared her throat and stood, straightening the papers in front of her. Mr. Depp, she said, her voice laced with forced politeness. You claim that you never struck Ms. Heard, yet there are messages, recordings, and witness statements that suggest otherwise. Are you saying all of these accounts are fabricated? I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. I knew what they were trying to do. They wanted me to stumble, to hesitate, to say something they could twist into a confession, but I would not give them that. What I'm saying, I replied calmly, is that the truth has been manipulated, words taken out of context, situations distorted, evidence manufactured, but the simple fact remains, I never hit her. The lawyer's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. Let's talk about the injuries then, she continued, pacing slightly. Ms. Heard provided images of bruises, cuts, swelling. Are you suggesting those injuries were self-inflicted? I hesitated for only a moment, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew how dangerous my words could be. Every sentence, every syllable would be analyzed, dissected, and twisted into something unrecognizable. I'm suggesting, I said carefully, that I was not the cause of those injuries. Another murmur rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer's eyes narrowed slightly. You expect the jury to believe that a woman would go to such great lengths to frame you? I met her gaze without flinching. Yes. It wasn't just about belief. It was about knowing. I had lived through it. I had seen the inconsistencies, the moments where her stories didn't align, where she conveniently remembered details only, when it suited her. I had watched as my life was taken apart piece by piece, knowing that the person who had once told me she loved me was the one holding the match to burn it all down. She wanted to paint me as the monster, and in doing so, she had rewritten our history. The love we had shared had been erased, replaced with accusations and carefully curated evidence meant to destroy me. I thought back to the recordings, the moments I had captured in desperate attempts to prove what was happening behind closed doors. I'd never wanted to take that route. It felt unnatural, even cruel, to record the woman I once loved. But something inside me had told me I needed to, that if I didn't, I would never be able to show the world the truth. My lawyer took over now, stepping forward with a quiet confidence that made me feel, for the first time in a long time, like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. "Mr. Depp," she said, her voice steady, "why did you stay? If things were as you say they were, why not walk away sooner?" I let out a slow exhale, my fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the stand. That was the question, wasn't it? The one people always asked when they didn't understand. Why stay in something that hurt you? Why not run the first time things turned dark? Because I loved her, I admitted, my voice quieter now. Because I believed she could change. Because I didn't want to accept that the person I had given my heart to was capable of this. The silence that followed was deafening. The truth was out there now, raw and exposed, and all I could do was wait for the world to decide what to do with it. The weight of my own words settled over the courtroom like a thick fog. I had said everything I needed to say, but the battle was far from over. The prosecution still had their questions, still had their carefully crafted strategy. To discredit me. I could see it in the way Amber's lawyer shifted in her seat, glancing at her notes as if searching for the next way to trap me in my own truth. She adjusted her glasses and looked up, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Depp, you say you loved Ms. Heard, that you believed she could change, but wouldn't a man who was truly afraid leave at the first sign of danger?" I almost laughed at the simplicity of the question. If only life were that easy. If only love worked that way. But it didn't. Love wasn't logical. It wasn't something you could measure or contain. It was messy, complicated, painful. I straightened in my seat. "Love isn't simple," I said. "Especially not when you believe in the person you're with. I didn't see the worst of her all at once. It wasn't like a switch flipped overnight. It was slow, gradual, like a tide pulling you further and further out until you don't even realize how deep you are." Amber's lawyer tilted her head slightly as if considering my words. "So, you're saying you didn't recognize the abuse until it was too late?" "I'm saying I didn't want to recognize it," I corrected. I made excuses for her. I told myself that she was struggling, that she was overwhelmed, that I could help her. I thought that if I loved her enough, she wouldn't need to hurt me anymore. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder again. The judge glanced up, giving a warning look to the spectators. I could feel the tension in the air, the curiosity, the doubt, the silent debates happening in the minds of everyone present. Amber sat still, barely moving. I didn't know if she was trying to keep up the appearance of composure or if she simply had nothing to say. Perhaps she was waiting for the trial to end, confident that her side would be believed. The lawyer adjusted her stance. "Let's discuss the recordings, Mr. Depp, the ones where Ms. Heard is heard admitting to hitting you. Why did you feel the need to record your private conversations?" I exhaled slowly. "Because I knew no one would believe me if I didn't." The response was simple, honest, but it carried a truth that was hard to ignore. People didn't expect men to be the victims. They didn't expect someone like me, a man who had played heroes, outlaws, legends, to be the one afraid in his own home. If I hadn't recorded those moments, if I hadn't gathered the proof, would anyone have even listened? My lawyer stood now, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. "Mr. Depp, would you say these recordings are the most important evidence in proving your innocence?" I shook my head. "No. The truth is the most important evidence." Amber's lawyer opened her mouth as if to argue, but I continued before she could. "The recordings are proof, yes. They show what really happened behind closed doors. But the truth has always been there. The only difference now is that people are finally hearing it." For a moment, no one spoke. It was a strange feeling, this silence. It wasn't empty. It was full of thought, of tension, of something shifting just beneath the surface. I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every person who had been silenced, for every person who had been painted as something they weren't, and I would not back down. The courtroom had become a place where my entire life was put under a microscope, dissected, and examined as if it were a scripted drama rather than my own reality. Every moment, every memory, every word I had ever spoken was being replayed, twisted, reshaped to fit a narrative that had been carefully crafted against me. But I sat there, unwavering, because I knew the truth. And for the first time in a long time, the truth was finally being heard. Amber sat across the room, her face unreadable. She had been so expressive once, full of energy, of fire, of passion. Now she was a statue, carefully composed, as if she knew that any crack in her armor would betray her. I wondered if she believed her own story at this point, if, after all, these months she had convinced herself that she was the victim, that I was the monster, or if she knew, deep down, behind all the performances, that the truth was beginning to unravel. My lawyer stood, her voice steady. "Mr. Depp, after everything you've heard in this courtroom, after all the accusations made against you, what do you want the jury to understand most about this case?" I let out a slow breath, gathering my thoughts. There was so much I wanted to say, but I had to keep it simple. I had to make them see me, not the version of me that had been painted in headlines, but the man sitting before them. "I want them to understand that I am not the person I've been accused of being," I said, my voice even. "I have spent my life building a career, creating art, telling stories, but in the last few years my own story was taken away from me. My name was dragged through the mud, my character destroyed, my reputation left in ruins, and it was all based on lies." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "I'm not perfect. I have made mistakes, like anyone. But one thing I have never done is raise a hand to a woman. Never. No matter how bad things got, no matter how much I was provoked, I never crossed that line. And I never would." The courtroom was silent. No objections, no interruptions, just the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my chest. Amber's lawyer finally stood, her face impassive. "Mr. Depp, even if you deny these allegations, surely you can understand how difficult it is for victims of domestic abuse to come forward. Do you not think it's possible that Ms. Heard is simply mistaken in how she remembers these events?" I turned my gaze to her, keeping my composure. "I understand that victims of abuse deserve to be heard," I said firmly, "but what happens when the accused is the real victim? What happens? When the truth is the opposite of what has been told? Do I not deserve to be heard as well?" Her jaw tightened slightly. She hadn't expected that response. I continued. "This case is not just about me," I said. "It's about the truth. It's about the fact that anyone can be a victim, regardless of gender. And it's about the damage that false accusations can do, not just to a person's career, but to their soul, to their dignity, to their entire life." The judge called for closing statements, and I knew that soon it would all be out of my hands. The jury would deliberate. The world would continue to judge. But I had done what I came to do. I had spoken my truth. As I stood to leave the courtroom that day, I glanced once more at Amber. She was still sitting there, motionless, staring straight ahead. For the first time, I thought I saw something break in her expression. Not defiance, not victory, but fear. Perhaps she finally realized that the truth had a way of finding its way to the light.